Hello and welcome to the Smartest Moron, where more Shin Megami Tensei goodness finally arrives. And oddly enough, we are starting this marathon off with the very first game I ever played. And you might also realize that I'm not showing myself on camera. Well, here's the thing. My editing software decided to be an asshole, and any MP4 files I upload no longer have any audio. Here's the thing, this might be a permanent thing since I can't really find a fix for it. Anyway, back to the review where I'm somewhat happier. Although after years of not touching this title, I realized I never fully appreciated this game back then. As a reminder, I was a pretty stupid guy in my youth, not really respecting the stories for what they did. Well, I think that's pretty obvious given how after replaying Devil May Cry 3's story again, I began to understand just how good that narrative was. That and stupid past me named his character Dante Uchiha. Yes, I am very embarrassed that this now exists on Twitch for all eternity when I stream most of the game. Now that I made fun of myself for it, let's never speak of this again. And since I keep getting corrected on the development cycle of games, I think it's best if I just stick with how I ended up getting some of these titles. And well, I'm feeling particularly lazy. I picked it up at Game Crazy, back when the store used to be a thing, and not only now just existing as some meme regarding the weird-ass videos they did. I was sold on it being a crazy combination of a darker Pokemon and Devil May Cry game, along with some ads I saw in some magazines. Actually, Raidou Kuzunoha is also responsible for me getting into Persona 3 thanks to the demon designs. Because, well, I thought the idea of Persona 3 was kinda stupid. Well, with how the evokers were basically guns and you put it up to your head to summon the persona. But then I saw the demon designs and it being related to Shin Megami Tensei eventually drew it to me more. I would eventually get other SMT games, like the first Digital Devil Saga game, then Nocturne, then the second Digital Devil Saga game before finally jumping into Persona 3, and obviously the sequel to Raidou Kuzunoha. So yeah, probably unlike some people today, assuming if they have any kind of interest, I actually got into Persona through Shin Megami Tensei games rather than the other way around. And yes, despite Atlus deciding to drop the SMT from those labels, I still consider Persona part of it. Since Atlus themselves have no real interest in promoting these titles beyond DLC to grab in older fans, not even a Switch port, granted, that's at the time of this video, I at least want to share my love of these games and hopefully draw more people to them. And despite my jabs at Persona, do not take that as me saying Persona is bad. I wouldn't keep buying these games if they were awful. It's just that I get burned out and would prefer to talk about the other games Atlus has done over arguing who is the best waifu. And it's obviously Kanji Tatsumi. Fight me. So now let's dive into Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner, Raidou Kuzunoha versus the Soulless Army. And yes, that is the full title. I dare you to find something longer. Prepare yourself for one of the more unique SMT games, as this is perhaps the only one in the series that lacks turn-based battles, choosing instead to be an action RPG. How well does this game handle those mechanics? Kind of a mixed bag, but far from being the worst first attempt. At least it's playable. Battles are still randomized, and it's simple to predict when you'll be attacked thanks to a glowing mark on the bottom right of the screen, as once it goes red, the demons will attack. However, the encounter rate at times could get annoying, even if I could sometimes reduce it. But then again, when is it not in any game featuring random encounters? Besides Bravely Default, I mean. There are no real ambush situations though, save for maybe being spawned in the middle of a bunch of enemies, yet I would hardly call that a disadvantage with the moves you possess. Raidou sadly can't use magic, but he is more than capable with his sword and gun. Sword combos have your basic 3-hit strike, but there's also a powerful thrust that can leave you vulnerable yet do a lot of damage, and a radial circle slash that hits foes close to you. Meanwhile, the gun has limited ammunition and isn't too strong unless you have the right kind of ammo, but it can stun foes. Depending on your timing, you can mix up the sword moves with the gun ever so slightly. More importantly, you can use elemental bullets to stun foes briefly, and by attacking their weak spot, you can freeze them in place and do more damage. As you level up, you might be tempted to spend all the points on strength, but your other stats should be considered carefully too. For instance, magic normally ups the magic attack of the character in SMT games, but since Raidou has no spells, this makes his demon stronger while also boosting his defense against magic. Given the onslaught I endured in my run, that made it doubly useful. Luck can help against status effects and vitality ups health and defense. Don't worry if you screw up though, as the game has items called incenses to increase your stats, which is basically a free level up in a way. Plus I found myself leveling up so often that unless it was endgame, I was pretty much good to go. However, your real weapons are the demons you can summon. You can only have one at a time on the field, and rather than negotiate like you would in most other SMT games, they need to be weakened with the correct element, and then you mash the circle button as fast as you can. Lowering their health bar does help a little bit, along with having a higher level. You can't just get the strongest demons right away because of this, and some demons simply cannot be recruited. The moon also plays a large factor, because a lot of demons can't really be recruited during a full moon, because I guess everyone is secretly a werewolf. Though to be fair, there is sort of a cycle to the moon that resets and starts again. It kinda interferes with skills and some of the sodas you get at this soda joint. It is a good idea to keep watch for it, because otherwise you're just gonna wait 800 yen on a soda pop. Your demon roster is always likely to keep growing and changing, since this game is also trying to make you a detective to advance through the story. For example, have someone not coughing up vital information? With a pagan demon, you can use the mind read ability to gain more info. See some demons harassing a human you can't get to and there's a body of water? With a frost-type devil, you can freeze the water to create a path. This definitely made me think twice about constantly fusing my demons, since not only would I be losing a potential partner and a good skill set, but they would probably be necessary in the case I'm working on. And recruiting a random demon while I lament over my poor button mashing skills as I'm now a feeble old man was something I just didn't want to do. Then it would save me time on backtracking to get to the fusion place to empty the slots on my roster just to get another demon. You can even send out a demon on their own to sneak by people and go through specific walls. All this stuff does need some prompts though, and is very necessary for stuff like in the final dungeon. Or maybe you just want to goof off and figure out what the girls think about you by invading their mental privacy, you pervert. Thankfully fusion is still here though, allowing you to take 2 demons and reenact Frankenstein's monster's birth. And yes, Victor is deliberately giving the vibes of that particular person. Using demons though can be a bit odd, as you can sometimes gain demons of the skill class who cannot be recruited normally, yet their only fusion seems to be completely random. Fortunately, in case a demon like this outlives their usefulness, you can also use the sacrifice fusion to up another demon's stats, or even use that same demon to enhance your sword, like adding more attack power, or even giving Raidou more resistance to certain spell types. You can unlock more fusions through a few side quests you have, but they feel a bit off, like figuring out what to do absolutely requires a guide. Or dumb luck. Yoshitsune, for example, needs to be found in a training hall hidden in a basin at the shrine, which is never pointed out to you. But that's the easiest one. Someone like, say, Alice needs 2 specific demons in your party, one of which is level 66, and by the time you can fuse her, she's a measly level 32. And Beelzebub requires a few items that I think I found by accident on my first attempt, and since he's level 80, I never bothered grinding so high to get him. Despite a boosting difficulty here and there between chapters, you're likely going to be between level 50 and 60 by the end of the game, but grinding for loyalty, yeah, this could have been done better. See, in order to fuse demons, simply having them is not enough. You also have to max out their loyalty, which will also grant a benefit like recovering health or MP. While not as annoying as trying to get a level up for a specific move, it can still be troublesome when you just got the demon and want to fuse it right away. Fortunately, you can register demons in the compendium. This allows you to be able to buy back that demon should you lose it for whatever reason, and get rid of this annoying process, especially when their loyalty will still be at max, should you have at least maxed it out. But doing that repeatedly will drain your money fast, especially if you don't know how fusion works. And in some cases it may not even be worth it. There is at least a benefit to keep swapping out demons to gain their loyalty over and over again, as you gain more tubes to summon more monsters depending on how much you have, as well as upping the capacity of Magnetite to summon stronger demons. However, it doesn't fully get rid of the problem, especially when backtracking can be an annoyance. Though at least if you learn a certain move, it can make all that training worth it, specifically the special moves you and the demon can execute at the same time. When their morale is high enough after fighting long enough, usually hitting enemy weaknesses and such or surviving for a long time, you can execute a special move, like a super bullet or a super slash to heavily damage foes, or even create shields that block specific attacks from the enemy. Given how tough some bosses can be, this game definitely wants you to use these. And what makes them even more awesome is that most can actually break through resistances and clear up fights easily. The only problem is needing to grind for the extra level, but that's small potatoes as you can still win fights without it. Unfortunately, the moveset for demons is extremely limited. This is also sadly from a time where skill placement could be randomized instead of easily customizable like it is now in certain Persona games. So it's very likely you're going to be stuck with a move pool for your demon you didn't like, such as having a useless heal boost passive when they only have offensive moves. This is another reason why leveling them up beforehand can be important, as you can gain more skills to try and juggle with, saving those up for a future cool demon, like maybe the ability to resist electric moves. Although I did eventually notice that even stats kind of transfer over depending on how many times they leveled up, creating an even stronger demon than before. The resistances though can be helpful, and I sometimes found that more useful than just having elements a boss was weak against, like having them focus too much on ice spells but your demon just keeps absorbing them. And that's expected when the AI is crap. Not enough to make the game a cakewalk since I did have many close calls, but bad enough to expect your demon to rapidly spend their MP or get their ass whooped. I think the devs noticed this since the cost for spells is hardly a problem given how much MP they have. Thankfully you do have some reasonable controls, such as telling what the spell the demon should be using against specific foes. I just wish they wouldn't waste their healing magic every time either me or them stubs their toes. Although at the very least they are more reliable than Donald from Kingdom Hearts. And if you don't try and give them orders, I have seen them still walk to where an enemy was just to waste MP with their attack that hits nothing. Some have even tried to attack the same enemy as me, only to run up against another enemy and get wailed on. What? What's even funnier though is that I've seen a boss do this too. Can you imagine if this was in Nocturne where you had Dante as a party member? Damn it, it's no good. Dante, get in here and help me out. Dante? Dante? Dante, this is why we don't have crossovers anymore. However, fights are still engaging enough for me to try and think of how to defeat the enemy and figure out the right placement of my demons. Especially when some moves are, well, cheap. Breaking tube restriction is the worst offender as there is no cure, and if a demon is stuck with this status, they can't be summoned at all. While some statuses aren't really that much of a problem, such as poison, sleep, and silence, stuff like confusion can mess with your controls, and charm... We'll get to that later, but the one I hate even more than that is stone. With this annoying effect, you cannot move, and the enemy can break you apart with enough hits. This was absolutely terrifying, as Raidou can't really get any kind of extra gear like accessories to nullify this problem. The move can be easy to avoid if the camera doesn't mess you up. The worst offender was the freaking Triglob demons. I was asked who my favorite demon was, but if you ever wanted to know my most hated, it's this bastard. He resists your sword strikes, can hit pretty hard with an annoying boomerang sword, and is immune to gunfire so elemental bullets will not do anything. And of course, he has the damn Petra spell which can turn you to stone. Sometimes I didn't even bother to fight and just fled from battles with them even if I was stronger. And if your demon does get charmed, you heal that shit immediately in a boss fight. I was tired during one stream and didn't realize my demon was healing the boss for huge amounts of health until it was too late. This is why resistances are so important, and how the right combination can get you out of hell. However, my biggest gripe is the camera. It's fixed in a single position, and in some fights, that can work out just fine. But when you have enemies attacking you off-screen with no prompts sometimes, or even the demons themselves being so big, I lost track of myself quite a bit. You can use certain moves like the gun to help control the battlefield, though it's just a band-aid to what I feel is a gaping wound. Especially with the damn Petra spell I just ranted about. And when there's so much chaos on screen, forget it. And while slowdown wasn't too common in my playthrough, it did happen near the end of the game, but nothing game-breaking. The magnetite mechanic is also something not really well thought out. See, summoning demons always requires you have some, as does fusing them, so if you ever run out, you're in big trouble. If you are ever in danger of running out, that is. I gain plenty from battles, and so long as you keep recruiting demons and earning their loyalty, your max amount will always be increasing. It was also confusing to me when a bar allowed for large sums of magnetite to be given in exchange for a demon, when it was unnecessary. Due to losing progress on the review, I decided to try out hard mode. I also regretted that. The damage you take is massive, buying items is a pain in the ass, you get the idea. Even passing the tutorial can be a pain from what I remember. The short length, about 20 to 30 hours, hints at replay value, and to be fair, there is, such as getting demons you miss, some other side quests, or even hard mode, which, as I explained before, can go below me, but that's pretty much it. There aren't really a lot of side quests beyond collecting hidden demons, and surprisingly no multiple endings to the story, and anything not involving getting more demons kinda bored me. Despite some problems with the camera and combat feeling a bit hard to pull off, I still had a ton of fun with this game, but for now, let's see if the story can be more enjoyable. Our story starts with a tutorial of how the main character, who I did not name Dante Uchiha this time, attains the title of Raidou Kuzunoha the 14th. After passing the test, he is partnered with a cat named Gouto who can talk. And yes, I also imagine he had the voice of Salem from Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Though he is also assigned to a partner with a detective agency, we never have a meeting to show how the group got along. Based on their dialogue, it feels like they were stuck with each other for a while. So if it feels like we are missing some story content, we are. The Raidou Kuzunoha series actually does have a novel where Raidou met Kyoji Kuzunoha, so I imagine some story bits are contained there. It sadly isn't translated, but these games are thankfully able to stand on their own and not constantly reference elements within those stories. There's also no voice acting either, barring some noises demons and certain people like Raidou make when getting hurt. A weird design decision, though I was never bothered by it. One day they receive a call from a schoolgirl who asks them to kill her. Before any questions can be asked, soldiers in red manage to appear and kidnap her, even beating Raidou up for good measure. So the gang have to investigate why someone would even take her, which leads to multiple events linked together on a grand scale. To make a very long story short, demons called Hiroku are leeching off the fears and anxiety of people, which can either turn the user into a red cape, a demon capable of causing a bit of destruction, or killing the host to be fully born. This is very important as the game mentioned the time period in Japan, with how westernization was taking over. Basically, think of it like advances in technology. For example, cars are being introduced and trying to be a better form of transportation when compared to a rickshaw. This will naturally harm the other business and create anxiety in people as they fear losing their jobs. It's like with how many people believe advancements in robotics will cause people to lose their jobs they trained for their entire lives. That kind of fear was perfect for them to take advantage of, to have their anxiety drained and eventually become monsters capable of harming the source of stress. Well, if a certain devil summoner isn't smacking them with his sword, the game isn't really biased as it shows both sides of the problem, but as for the extent of the damage, well, let me put it this way. Yeah, likely thousands of people have died in this game. Without spoiling the story anymore, I feel like we have another situation where the game is trying to promote its story over its own characters. Let me put it this way, characters mostly serve about one or two purposes and don't really do much outside of those. Like the scientist guy who suddenly shows up near the end of the game. I know him for one chapter as he was never really built up all that much, and he doesn't even appear in the sequel as far as I know. The Yakuza was definitely a fun character with an entertaining bathhouse brawl with his mooks, but apart from giving you info, he doesn't really contribute much. In fact, I don't even think he leaves that bathhouse except for one scene. Tei does give you vital info and her conversations with Narumi can be entertaining, but she's about as useful as you expect. At least I didn't have to save her too often. Even some of the spoiler characters receive the same kind of treatment. There is a difference between this and Shadow Hearts from the New World though. I was aggravated with that game because of how many party members you had, and only about 3 were all that important at best, while the rest felt like either jokes or worthless. And since they are glued to you once recruited, my expectations for character development rose significantly. Whereas in this game, those who are glued to Raidou are actually kind of important and they get some of the necessary character development, which is basically Narumi and Gouto. Plus, it's still able to tell a more satisfying story regardless of that problem. I think that's why I've seen so many people say this game has no story, despite clearly having one. Well, that and there's a clear goal of discovering the mystery. That said, the plot is linear with certain things needing to be done. You can't just skip certain steps even if you know what to do. Basically, think how Phoenix Wright wanted you to do certain things beforehand, even if you knew how to debunk the court battle with the right piece of evidence. So let's not waste any time and get to those spoilers. Every story needs a sudden twist and this game is no exception. Despite me spoiling one of the things earlier. General Munakata, one of the main antagonists heading up the Super Soldier Project, is revealed to have been taken over by Sukuna-hikona. And yes, that is the first persona Naoto Shirogane has. However, that's not really the most interesting twist to me. It's how Narumi is actually related to the general and takes matters into his own hands. Narumi at this point has been painted as the goofball bossman, that while talented, often screws up by not paying tabs, hates being around certain people, and is mostly used for comic relief. While he does make Raidou do stuff and is called a slave driver, there's never a sense that he doesn't care about what Raidou goes through. During a moment when Raidou is sent through time and space by the Dark Summoner Rasputin, who is also a robot from the future, and yes, I did wonder if I was still playing Shadow Hearts from the New World, Narumi decides to go after Munakata himself despite all the demons there. I mean, technically those red soldiers can be taken down by normal people as one Yakuza kicked their asses, but he was still in over his head, yet took charge because he felt the problem was his, likely also feeling guilty for putting Raidou through those problems he believed he should have solved. This is mainly because he actually had ties to Munakata, and explains how that guy did want to protect Japan with advanced weaponry, but never to such a degree civilians would get hurt, which confuses Narumi. Yet given what happens with Sukuna-hikona, the fears that man had were likely feeding that demon. It confuses Narumi even more since he quit the army after they were doing less than ethical things, likely having alternate ideas that may have been similar to the Super Soldier Project. All I'm saying is I don't think Captain Japan was being made. Given his link to the military and Munakata, this actually explains why Narumi was beaten up earlier. See, there was a case involving a mole in the army who actually worked in the Navy, and he needed Raidou's help in destroying a curse placed on his superior. But in order to get this help, and despite this being Raidou's duty according to the Shrine Lady, he kicks the crap out of Narumi. I remind you, this is supposedly one of the good guys since he does have the safety of the capital in mind. However, upon finding out about Narumi's past, suddenly him getting beaten up makes sense as the Navy officer might assume he and Munakata were still linked together, or maybe even partially helped him with the project. Sadly, because he was being possessed all this time, I don't really have a good grasp on Munakata himself. Maybe Sukuna-hikona was doing a perfect job acting, maybe it was half and half. Then again, I could just be trying to read way too much into this. This is kind of the problem I have with mystery stories like this, where without getting to know a character well enough, it can just kind of fall flat. Not to say this is bad or anything, just probably could have been done much better. Maybe have Sukuna-hikona make more of a good point, or try to feed off Raidou's own insecurities. How fortunate then that the game provided such a character. In order to carry on with the theme, you need to know exactly what the demon that possessed Kaya was. Or was it a demon at all? The final enemy, the mastermind who was pulling things from the shadows, was really Raidou Kuzunoha, the 40th, at least according to the wiki anyway. Or you could just call him Raidou Kuzunoha, extra large. Actually, you know what, fuck it, I'm sticking with that one, that's funny. This requires a bit of an explanation. One of the main things about Kaya was that she had a demon trying to take over her body, and that's why Munakata actually wanted her in order to, get the Super Soldier project done better. However, instead of an actual demon, it was a Raidou Kuzunoha from the far future, and this is related to the other Shin Megami Tensei games. So to borrow a thing from Linkara and to top the fourth wall, time for backstory. So if you don't know anything about the other Shin Megami Tensei games in the SNES, well, the future is kinda dead. Basically, demons started to take over the world more and more, God got pissed off and decided to enact the Great Cataclysm, destroying the world through flooding and nuclear weapons. Also, some people within the military were disguised as demons, and some cities were destroyed, like Tokyo. If you played Shin Megami Tensei 4, this may sound familiar, as Masakados in that continuity shielded the city from the nukes. Raidou Kuzunoha XL in this timeline was more of a Templar, working under God, and didn't like the future he was living in since, remember, angelic forces in this series are kinda huge assholes. By helping Sukuna-hikona destroy Tokyo, he believed he had a chance to change the future, since I guess there wouldn't be a Tokyo left to destroy. Yeah, it's never really clear why this specific change has to be made, but then again, I'm the guy relying on Wikia summaries for events I don't know about. Raidou Kuzunoha might share a few similarities with the victims he exploited, mainly that he too is a being that fears what his future will become, and is taking drastic measures to change that, becoming no better than any of the Red Capes. And given the messed up angels have done in other games, it's kinda understandable. The fear of what his future is and will continue to become has driven the guy insane enough to forget what he's meant to represent. Though one can argue he's trying to think of the bigger picture, the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few and all that jazz. It's kind of the same argument some people have had regarding the true demon ending being the right call. Though Raidou 14th is obviously more of a heroic and selfless figure and can't let the destruction happen. And it's hard to be more on XL's side when I'm still trying to figure out how the hell destroying Tokyo will prevent everything from going wrong. I'm starting to think maybe this game was more for the older SMT fans as opposed to newcomers. At least with this bit. Still, I guess you could say there's a bit of tragedy with how both Raidous couldn't work together. XL probably could have helped benefit the future more, although maybe that's a bit much given the angels and demons could have just intervened whenever they wanted. I mean, technically speaking, they start getting involved in the sequel a bit. And when we sadly don't get much more of his views on what he wanted to achieve, I felt the final dungeon did an adequate job of trying to do that. In there are many souls that try to traverse the area to see what awaits them in the future, or how things are made even worse, or just going through the past for the hell of it. And at first, things seem standard, like the mention of the bombing of Hiroshima, but then as Raidou dives further into the future, the events of SMT 1 and 2 are mentioned, disasters are given some more detail, and while likely not as good as telling the story as the previous titles, does help give us a clear picture of what XL hates about his timeline. Hell, the fact that the number of Raidous goes up to 40 in about 100 years or so does start ringing some alarm bells of how messed up this future is. Hell, we even learned that Rasputin was sent from the future to change things, but all he cares about is getting laid, apparently. Well, after fulfilling a contract. Yeah, not much is done with the guy, although he does have one of my favorite scenes in the entire game. Raidou Kuzunoha, being a silent protagonist, might also feel like he has no emotion, but small things here or there say otherwise. Like the way he moves his body in cutscenes, in particular when Gouto ends up dying when a rocket is shot up to space. And now I get the feeling you're only going to remember this game due to how bizarre and freaky some of these moments are. Anyway, once the cat bites the dust, there is clear emotion when Raidou is clearly saddened by it, with how he moves his hat and is more sad than celebrating the fact that the giant transformer of rage is taken out. As for how the theme connects to Raidou, he might be afraid of how he stacks up to the past, especially when it's revealed that Gouto is actually the very first Raidou, cursed to live as a cat and watch and guide his successors. There's even a game over scene where past Raidous shame him before ending his life. Even if that wasn't a real thing and all goes on in his head as he dies, that tells me a lot. Another point that could fit into the theme is how the Soulless army was basically made, a possible reflection of what the Kuzunoha clan could act like right now, or the future they're heading down towards. If you compare their outfits to Raidou, it feels like they are mass-produced devil summoners. Not too far off when these super soldiers can work well with demons, use swords and guns effectively, and big guns too, and their looks are basically what I imagine an evil devil summoner to look like. Or at least something of an upgraded form. Even the lack of emotions and soul just adds to that, making perhaps the perfect soldier that anyone could want. Knowing that these beings were likely going to replace protectors like the Kuzunoha clan if the plan succeeded, that likely didn't help Raidou's anxiety either, especially when they are able to overpower him on a few occasions. Still, if there's one thing I felt was wasted, it was the one moment when Raidou and Gouto are pulled into an alternate dimension months before their case truly began. This Raidou, or Raidou, however you pronounce that, definitely feels more aggressive than his counterpart, itching to see how his other self can do in a mirror match, and even eager to take them down until his own cat buddy stops him. Him being more hot-headed and hungry to fight could explain the scar. Sadly, that's about the extent the interactions go, and we never hear from this guy until the sequel and a side quest featuring everyone's favorite, Mara. Relax, we're covering that game next, so keep your own Mara in your pants. Overall, how does Raidou Kuzunoha versus the Soulless army hold up? In some ways, it's more frustrating than I remember, but I think I gained more respect for it due to the story, but at the same time, this is a hard recommendation for fans and honestly is probably one of the weaker SMT games. The game definitely has some stuff that needs to be worked out and fine-tuned, but it's far from unplayable. It's definitely beatable, and despite the bad AI in some cases, manages to pull off some challenging and interesting battles. Plus the story is actually fairly good. Nothing award-winning, but it helps set the table for the characters, provides some interesting struggles, and lays the groundwork for more games. As far as their first attempt for an SMT action game goes, it worked out okay. That said, those flaws are very hard to overlook, and the game can be frustrating thanks to certain other elements, like the goddamn camera. This is a game that's harder for me to recommend to people thanks to those problems, and thanks to spoilers, might be worth playing more if you know about the first two SMT games. But fortunately, if my memory is right, you might be able to jump into the sequel with little issue. I'm the smartest moron, and thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, all that fun stuff that YouTube forces me to say, and check out my Patreon, where I now added goals for videos regarding how many patrons I have. And I'll see you next time with the review of Raidou Kuzunoha vs King Abaddon.